A wisdom, 1914, that belonged once to an all-rounder from Warwickshire called Percy Jeeves, who's immortalised in the books of P.G. Wodehouse. Jeeves was probably going to play for England pretty soon, very fine all-rounder, but he was killed in the fighting in France in the First World War. This was his wisdom. He's underlined his name here and there throughout on the scorecards, which is very touching. These three very early wisdoms were the property of the great Gilbert Jessup, the croucher, the world's greatest hitter. I don't know how well he'd go today. Probably he'd hold his own. He'd probably be scoring 30-ball hundreds in 2020 and what have you. Gilbert Jessup, very precious just to hold them, the croucher. But even more so is this wisdom which belonged to A.E. Stoddart, Drew E. Stoddart, a man whose life story, with its tragic ending, I turned into a series of books. This is the last one. Stoddy, England's finest sportsman. He captained England at rugby, he captained them at cricket, including the first great Ashes series, 1894-95. He made 173 in Melbourne, which was the highest score by an England captain in Australia for 80 years, until Mike Donness, against a substandard Australian bowling attack, got past him. Stoddy's made a few notes in this wisdom. At the back he's made comparisons between the bowling of Bobby Peel and Tom Richardson on the two tours that he led in Australia in the 1890s. Very thoughtful man, very sensitive man, very popular man, but his suicide in 1915 tends to have buried his name, and I've tried very hard to re-establish him in the consciousness of English cricket. Jack Brown's signature, Bobby Peel, Billy Brockwell, Bill Lockwood, Johnny Briggs, Albert Ward, Tom Richardson, Humphreys, Phillipson, Ford, Gay, Archie McLaren and A.E. Stoddart. These are the signatures in Stoddy's scrapbooks for the 1894-95 tour of Australia, the first great Ashes series. Brown, of course, who used that bat we saw earlier to make that record 50 and 100 in the deciding match in Melbourne. Stoddart's scrapbook for the 1894-5 tour of Australia starts off with this picture of them on board the ship that took them to Australia. It's a wonderful picture, really. You can actually identify the players in their straw boaters standing by the ship's rail at that dramatic moment as they set sail on what became the first great Ashes series, a classic. Throughout Stoddy's scrapbooks, he's got these original photographs. They might have faded a little, but not much. They're very important pictures. That's the old Melbourne cricket ground. No identification for the players, but a wonderful mood picture. Yeah. He pasted in letters from fans, one of them offering a match. Then we come to this intriguing section, which is full of pictures of society women. He was a very popular boy, was Stoddy, so it's possible that he knew many of these ladies personally. Match reports, menus, cartoons, caricatures, cables. That was very popular. They didn't have emails then, but they had those. There's some more women, some of them mysteriously captioned. The Australians who played against that England team. Another fan letter from a young girl who said she'd be looking out for him at Sydney. Another fan letter. I'm intrigued by this note of Stoddy's. He wrote for the book. There never was a book, but at one stage perhaps he had a book lined up which would have made very interesting reading, because A lot happened in this series, mostly happy for England, but it was a classic, 2-2 going to the final test. The reports are all very formal in those days, almost ball by ball. He did one for his second tour as captain, but that was nowhere near as happy as this one. In fact, it was disastrous. But this, although it probably needs rebinding now, is a real treasure, an historical treasure. That's the email of the day, the old telegram that was delivered by hand. And that's the English team with a dog, and the Australian side in one of those tests led by George Giffen, with the tragic Albert Trott there, who joins Stoddy in the Middlesex team shortly afterwards. Match reports that went on for page after page. Stoddy's Hampstead Club, where he made that 485. And these pictures here I've scanned and played around with, and they've come out quite sharply. They're fascinating. The teams are fooling around, some of them, at this informal gathering. And I think it was down at Hastings in one of those gentlemen's matches. There's Stoddy there sitting close behind McLaren, who was a good mate of his and led England subsequently. Unpublished pictures, most of these. Of course, you can't go far without W.G. Grace. He and Stoddy had many an opening partnership. Sometimes Stoddy looked the superior player, but perhaps I'm biased. Good golfer too. He was a top sportsman all round. Look at him lining up a putt there. And a very popular man. Everyone loved him. It's a shame that Stoddy's name faded away, but I've done my best to bring him back to cricket's consciousness. This is Stoddy's second team as captain to Australia, 1897-98. England were thrashed on that tour. Everything went wrong. But there he is in the middle, and above him is the great Ranjit Singh, a little Indian who enchanted Australia. They had all sorts of products bearing his name, one of the earliest sponsorships. And we have the team signatures there, which are a very rare piece of memorabilia. Lacking Ranji, because I think Ranji, having gone overland across Europe, wasn't around when this voyage got underway. However, of all the Ranjit Singh sponsorships and commercial exploitations, this is one that I've managed to pick up a long time ago, and it's the Cigar Cutter. You put the cigar in there, turn the handle, which is a bit rusted up at the moment, but that took the end off the cigar. He put his name to all sorts of things, all without an agent. The letter collection amounts to well over 6,000 from about 2,400 different signatories. And one of the precious corners of that collection, of course, is the Bradman Letters. There's over 100 of them. This is a rare early one, not to me, before I was born, 1929, to Mr. Stevens. That could well have been Alf Stevens, who was one of his early backers down in Bowral. There's another early one there when he wrote to Ron Yeomans in 1938 saying that he was too busy to play squash when he got to Leeds. One to Swanton. And then he's writing to me for the first time. We had correspondence that stretched from the early 70s until he died early in the 21st century. There's 120 of them, and not one of them is glib or superficial. He wrote in great sincerity about all sorts of matters concerning cricket, but life in general. And they're handwritten, which makes it even more appealing. It's a wonderful archive, and I really do treasure it. Thank you, Don. W.G. Grace, I think everyone's heard of him. These are relics of his handwriting, which is a little bit untidy, especially for a doctor, but typical, I suppose. Invitations for people to play in his matches over at Crystal Palace. A receipt for London County signed by him as a member. There's the batting order there, the batting order of one of the London County games. A lot of hardly well-known players used to take part, but the thrill of playing alongside the old doctor must have been immense. There are quite a few W.G. letters there. They're not as rare as some people might think, but I'm very pleased to have these.